Otherwise, your section 4, if you flip the page. This one's on food chains and food webs. Also some things that you've probably done before.
Very tedious.
So we got to talk about the structure of a food chain. We got to talk about trophic levels. Those would be the new things. And then we need to talk about feeding relationships in a food web. In a complex food web, there's a lot of different ways that things can be related, even if you don't see it directly. So we have a lot to learn with that a little at the end of the day. But we're going to analyze those relationships, starting with a simple food chain. We already had one on the other set, grass, cows, us. So we're going to come up with a new one. Let's be creative, though. Let's not use grass as our producer.
Corn. No.
Sunlight, plants, cows.
Corn is a grass.
We can start with corn. But what's going to eat the corn?
Raccoons.
The pigs.
The combine.
The pigs. The
Combine.
combine. Cow poop. The combine.
What's going to eat the raccoon?
Skunk.
Let's say a turkey vulture.
The badger.
Is that realistic?
Yeah.
Sure. Vulture, huh? And then I actually want one more step in this. What's going to eat the turkey vulture?
Jared.
No.
I was gonna say bacteria in the ground.
Oh, that would work too. You can do whatever you want for
It's not the
yours.
same thing.
But I wanted different levels here, and I wanted 4 different levels here, so that for later on in these notes, you have something to refer to quickly, and it's not as complicated as the food web that we'll do later. This is my producer. These 3 things are consumers, but they're all at different levels. The raccoon is actually a primary consumer in this example because it eats a producer directly.
Is that supposed to be?
Yes.
Nope, that's at 1 degree. The turkey vulture is a secondary consumer because it eats a primary consumer. It doesn't eat the corn, it eats the raccoon that ate the corn. And then Jared's going to be our tertiary consumer. Kind of a weird word. Sounds like Hershey candy bars with a T in the front. So tertiary. So this is primary, this is secondary, this is tertiary. I'm going to use the symbols, but I am going to expect you to eventually use the word so that you can sound intelligent. So can you say that word, tertiary?
Tertiary.
It is difficult. You will sound silly a couple times if you screw it up, but it's okay. Everybody's in the same boat. I'm probably the only one who's heard that word before today, so. Actually, you guys probably heard it before, but. Other things, types of consumers. Right? Aside from primary, secondary, tertiary, there's all these other vocab words that you know already. Herbivores eat what?
Plants.
Carnivores eat what?
Meat.
It's not going to say meat.
Animal.
It's going to say animals.
Wait.
But you know what that means anyway. An omnivore would eat plants and animals. So what's an example of a herbivore?
A cow.
Horse.
A lot of those dinosaurs, like maybe a brontosaurus, a cow is, a horse is.
Right.
What's an example of a carnivore?
What's the one with the long neck?
A what?
A cat.
A bronchiosaurus.
Any kind of cat, whether it's a lion, tiger, or just a house cat.
Yeah.
Mr. Source.
The Pumpkin Pantry.
What's the name of the punch?
Yeah, the
The stegosaurus?
What?
Stegosaurus?
Yeah.
With the spikes on the back?
No. Like long on that.
Brontosaurus?
Yeah.
Sauropods.
Or it might actually be, they're not all brontosaurus. There's another word for, I don't remember. You'd have to ask somebody who's watched or read about that much more frequently than I
I
have.
didn't go back to elementary school.
What's an example of an omnivore?
Bear.
Us.
Bears are good examples.
Dogs.
Jared is also one.
Dogs.
So we are,
No, Jared's an omnivore.
detrivores eat what?
What?
Dead.
Dead.
Organic matter.
Dead organic matter.
No. Worms.
And if they are going to take that matter and break it down into its simplest constituents and put that back into the environment, they're called decomposers. So typically, those detritivores, the decomposers, are at the end of the food chain. They're recycling things so it can start all over again. What's an example of one?
A worm.
A worm,
A maggot.
or maggots, or
Just bacteria.
now maggots aren't necessarily decomposers, but they are detritivores.
Flies.
But your worms and like fungus and
Mushroom.
bacteria, a lot of different kinds of bacteria, they're decomposers that actually break it down even further so it can go back into the soil. The plant can pick it up again and it starts all over through that path. A specialist eats one or maybe two different things. So it's an example of a specialist that only eats one thing.
The monkeys that only ate that one deal, so one type of insect. The nut.
Monkeys, primates in general are omnivores. They eat a lot of different things, right?
That's not
So an example of a specialist could be like a panda. What do they eat?
Bamboo.
Bamboo.
Oh, that's here.
Whereas,
Cats pee on it.
Cats don't eat vegetables. I agree, Clay.
again, you are actually more of a generalist because you have a varying diet. You have a lot of different things you can eat. Why would you have an advantage over a panda in that regard?
Because we can have.
One food source.
Our
It's
diet
just
is
like
more
genetic
diverse.
diversity.
Because if one food source disappears, you could still survive, Fred. I like that answer. Whereas if the bamboo suddenly went extinct, the pandas would probably be in trouble. Luckily, there's plenty of bamboo. It's one of those plants that grows like multiple inches a day. It's like can grow up to a foot a day. So it grows really, really fast. There's lots of bamboo for 'em.
Really true.
No, it can actually grow like 6, 7. I don't remember how many it was, but it
Like
grows
corn on a hot
a
day.
lot
Can
in one day.
Oh my.
I don't know.
It just does it when you're not looking at it.
It just waits until you're not looking.
Yeah. Snakes didn't die.
Okay, your trophic levels again. You just need those symbols. I put those words up there so you wouldn't have to write them yourselves and misspell them. Hopefully you can pronounce them eventually. Primary, secondary, tertiary. So Moss, how do you say this word?
Terran. I don't know.
It's like Hershey with the T in front. Tertiary.
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 It is possible to say it. You'll figure it out eventually. So, Kayron, how do you say it? Tertiary. There you go.
Tertiary.
So then we get to our food web. So I'll get you guys started on this, but this is kind of, I'm going to let you go through and label this yourself for the most part. But we're going to start out from the bottom. What is the producer in this ecosystem?
Grass.
Are there any other producers?
No.
No. So wouldn't that make grass kind of important to this ecosystem? So what kind of thing is it? From a couple- It's a keystone species, right?
Yes.
If you remove the grass, what would happen to the sparrow population?
Gone.
It would disappear. Nothing in this could survive without the grass. So aside from the one producer, there's lots of consumers in here. You're supposed to go through and label all of the different organisms as either primary, secondary, or tertiary. Remember,
They can be
I'll help you with some of them. Primary consumers eat producers. Secondary consumers eat primary consumers. Tertiary eats secondary. And yes, some things might have more than one label. So you're not stuck just calling it secondary. It could also be tertiary. It might be 3 different labels. Just depends on what it is. So go through and label everything as either primary, secondary, or tertiary. There is no such thing as 4. We don't go up to quaternary, which in theory can exist, but we don't really worry about past that tertiary. That's the apex for anything that we're worried about.
Okay, tertiary.
So go through and give everything at least one label. Yes, some things should get more than one label, but at least one label for everything. That way we have something to start off with.
This is that, and I guess that's
I don't understand.
it.
I found one with four.
No, that doesn't turn this into a secondary.
doesn't.
There's just no higher levels. So this is a tertiary, but it's also tertiary. There you go.
Grasshopper.
Grass.
So again, I am actually, when I ask you specifically, I'm gonna want you to say primary, secondary, or tertiary, so try and use the word that's appropriate. But if you, yeah, you're on the right track, keep going, work your way out.
Dynamo.
You just look backwards. So what did this by here? And that's a one, so this becomes
Everything else, call me.
some things can end up having more than one label, but at least get one label.
My California building. I think so.
Yeah.
Those cows have friends.
What did it eat? Okay, so we need to get through all these. So first off, Jarrett, what's the rabbit?
What's the rabbit?
Yeah.
The rabbit is a primary.
It is a primary consumer because they ate the producer. That makes sense. Mary, what is the hawk? You're gonna make it secondary because it ate the rabbit directly, right? So that actually makes sense. Hayden, you're on garter snake.
Secondary.
So that could be secondary because it eats a primary grasshopper. That makes sense. Corbin, how about the spider?
Secondary.
It's secondary because it eats the grasshopper. Now, when you get one that has lots of arrows, make sure you understand that the arrow's pointing towards what does the eating, not the other way around. Right? That arrow is supposed to represent the flow of energy. So the energy went from the sun to the grass, to the grasshopper, to the spider, ultimately. So don't get confused when there's lots of arrows pointing in different directions. That sparrow does not get eaten by the spider. It's the other way around. It'd be a pretty big spider if it was eating the sparrow. And those do exist, but not in this scenario. There are some big spiders in the world. They don't live around here. Don't worry about it. So Zach, praying mantis?
Secondary.
Secondary? That seems right. How about that sparrow then, Moss?
Secondary?
It could be a secondary because it definitely eats. Oh, and it's
The
try it
tertiary.
tertiary.
Turkey.
So it could be two labels. That's fine. And there were probably some others too, but we'll go back to those. And then finally, my mouse there, Burke.
Primary and secondary.
She's got primary and secondary for that. So it eats the producer. It eats the grasshopper that's primary. So that's definitely true. How about looking up here, Clay? There should be more than one label on at least one more thing up there.
Yes, tertiary.
The hawk can also be tertiary. That's true. There's two more labels missing?
Yep.
Jacob, do you see one that might be missing? Look for something that has multiple arrows going into it. The only reason the hawk could have two different labels is because it has multiple things that it eats.
But it's close.
So is there anything else? Did you see anything, Jacob? How about Mr. Elwood?
What?
You see another one?
I do. It happened to be the toad.
The toad needs to be what?
Tertiary.
It's also tertiary because it can eat a spider. And it also eats praying mantis. Secondary.
No.
Is there another one, Chris? I think there might be one more label that we're missing.
The hot secondary.
It only eats one thing, so it's stuck being tertiary. So not that one. Damien, do you see it?
The mouse is tertiary.
Mouse can be all three. Because it also eats a praying
You
mantis,
gotta be
it's,
kidding me.
and so can the spider.
I
So-
think the praying mantis would kill them.
The mouse seems to be the
Would the hognose snake not be secondary?
hognose.
How can be secondary?
It only eats one thing, and that's the secondary.
But it's all,
It could be like maybe a 4 if that existed, but we don't really worry about that. Just like how the hawk could be a 4 if that existed, but we don't have a quaternary. That's what the next word would be, I would assume, but because it is in other contexts. But
I think it'd be
tertiary eats it, couldn't it be a secondary?
what's that?
Since a tertiary eats it, couldn't it be a secondary?
Oh, you're going reverse. Since this is tertiary, this could be secondary. That's not how we do it. Don't go backwards. Just forward. I know what you mean now. Because somebody else asked the same question, and that's reasonable. So don't go backwards, go forward from it. This became a tertiary because it ate this secondary, and it's a secondary because it ate this primary, but that doesn't change this. Okay, so if you got all that, we should be good.